Good afternoon. I am James Gray. I'm the Senior Government Relations Director for the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, which is the nonpartisan advocacy affiliate for the American Cancer Society. We work on passing evidence-based laws and policies to help eliminate cancer, make fighting cancer a national and state priority. Welcome to today's virtual forum, which is the second of two forums that we've hosted this year. We had a really robust conversation last month around rural cancer patients and the challenges that rural cancer patients face, and talked a lot about some of the legislative issues we're working on this session that, if passed, would address some of those challenges that patients face. We are really privileged today to be able to talk about CPRIT and celebrate 15 years of the success that CPRIT has had, and more importantly, the role that they put Texas in to become a leader in the fight against cancer. So let's begin our formal part of this presentation. So some of the most important decisions affecting cancer patients and their families happen in the halls of the Texas Capitol. That was certainly the case in 2007 when the Texas Legislature created the Cancer Prevention and Research Institute of Texas, that we all fondly refer to now as CPRIT. This new state agency was responsible for investing $3 billion in cancer research and prevention over the next 10 years. This forward-thinking investment was made possible by so many legislative champions who saw an opportunity to make our state a leader in the fight against cancer by building on what was already happening in Texas. But it was also, for many of our elected officials, personal as well, because just like you and me, those who represent us in Austin have been touched by cancer, and they use their collective experience to overwhelmingly support the creation of CPRIT. And that continued in 2019 with the legislature reauthorizing CPRIT and providing another $3 billion in funding. This was a bipartisan effort again that gives CPRIT another 10 years of essential funding to continue their mission. But it's really hard to believe it's been 15 years since the initial bills authored by Senator Jane Nelson and Representative Jim Keffer became law. We are thankful for their leadership that allows us today to celebrate the great work that CPRIT has done. I would also like to thank the many nonprofit organizations that were part of this process. Certainly it took a village to make sure CPRIT gets done. Organizations such as the Texas Healthcare and Bioscience Institute, the Texas Medical Association, Leukemia Lymphoma Society, Livestrong, the American Lung Association, as well as Susan G. Komen, have really been there from the beginning, have been staunch advocates for the establishment of CPRIT, but more importantly, the ongoing work that it takes to maintain funding for CPRIT. So thank you for that. And then lastly, the most important part of this process has been the voters. The voters were asked twice to reauthorize or authorize $3 billion in funding for CPRIT. Both times, in 2007 and 2019, the voters stepped up with 64% of the vote and supported the reauthorization and the establishment of CPRIT. Clearly, the voters have mandated Texas be a leader in the fight against cancer. Because of CPRIT, we now have the necessary infrastructure in place to not only develop new therapies, but to change the way we detect and treat this disease, as well as support innovation. We have a lot to celebrate today, and we have a significant story to tell, and we have some wonderful speakers that will give you a real sense of the reach that CPRIT has, but more importantly, how unique CPRIT is for the role that Texas has kind of put forward in becoming a leader in the fight against cancer. So let me do this. I want to just kind of help you navigate your screen a little bit, and then we'll get into the more formal presentations. You will notice on your screen the photos of the speakers, and then below that, you'll notice the list of our sponsors. And without their generous support, this program would not be possible. And our speakers or our sponsors include, at a platinum level, Natera; at a gold level, Bristol Myers Squibb, Gilead, the Texas Society of Clinical Oncology, as well as Pharma. At a silver level, our sponsors include AbbVie and Pfizer, and a bronze level, Amgen. And of course, a number of community supporters, all of them being very generous in allowing us to have this conversation today. There will be a question and answer section at the end of the program. So there is a box for ask our presenter a question. Please put your questions in there for the speakers and reference who that question might be for. We'll make sure that question gets asked at the very end of the program. Then below that, there's a box that's ask a question. That gives you a chance to speak to the larger audience. And if you have a technical issue, put that issue in the chat, and somebody on the team can kind of help you resolve that issue. So again, thank you all for joining us. There's been significant interest in this issue. We have great attendance. So let's start the formal program. We want to begin with patient stories. And Ilana Stromberg, I think, is a really important voice in this whole process. Not only is she a cancer survivor, but she understands the important role that research plays because she, through her nonprofit, invests in it. But she's also benefited from research and has benefited directly from CPRIT research. Her story is powerful, and her story is why we do what we do. Let me hand it over to you.
Hi. Hi, I'm Ilana Stromberg. I'm the mother of 5 precious children and the co-founder of an advocacy group that supports researchers and clinicians in their work towards finding a cure for red-positive non-small cell lung cancer. I am so grateful for the way Texas has funded cancer research, because without it, I would not be alive today. In 2017, a very well-reputed group of about 7 doctors found something on my lung through a CT scan, but they concluded that it was not cancer because it did not grow over a 6-week period. They told me that it was probably some kind of scar tissue because I grew up in South Africa and had been exposed to some South African disease. And when I asked for a biopsy, I was told that it was too dangerous based on its location to biopsy it. So having 3 children at the time, under 18 months old, and a busy life, I guess I wanted to believe that, and I went on living my otherwise very healthy life. In 2019, my sister was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I was still coughing. And I went back to a doctor in Austin at that point, and took all the files and showed her my records, and she seemed alarmed, sent me for another CT scan. And I was correctly diagnosed with non-small cell lung cancer. This was extremely shocking to me because of what I had been told previously, and because I live a very healthy lifestyle. I've never smoked. I'm very active. But the reality set in, and about 3 weeks later, I had the doctors believed it was an isolated tumor, so I had surgery, which again they believed that would cure it. But I found out that it had already spread to 2 of my hilar lymph nodes. So I did 4 months of chemo. And at that point, I was stable for about a year, and we had hoped we'd gotten it. However, about a year later, I learned that it had metastasized to my liver. And so I was referred to a surgeon to remove it. And he told me I was inoperable because it had gone through my bloodstream. And so now there was cancer throughout my body. And even though we couldn't see it all, removing my liver, part of my liver, would not cure the cancer. And so he did not feel comfortable operating. Thankfully, my oncologist at the time had done, or earlier had done biomarker testing on my original tumor. And so we had found out that I was red positive. And my oncologist informed the surgeon that there was a brand new, just FDA approved systemic treatment called selpercatinib that I could take, and it would take care of the rest of the cancer load if we could, go ahead and do the surgery. So I had liver surgery, all went well. I began taking this drug, which is 2 pills a day. I had no side effects. Everything was good. And a month later, we found out that it had actually also metastasized to my brain, probably before I even started, before the liver surgery. Again, thanks to amazing funding that led to incredible research, I was a candidate for gamma knife radiation, which was an amazingly easy and successful process. It was a total of an hour, I think, or 45 minutes, after which I went for breakfast with my family and had no side effects. Since my liver surgery, I've continued taking selpercatinib, and I'm really, really healthy. I live fully. I raise my sweet children. I work daily to support doctors in finding a cure for red-positive cancer. And I'm probably even healthier than most of my peers, other than I have this very scary diagnosis. Along the way, we were really fortunate to get to talk with and get guidance from the incredible people at CPRIT. I realized that their work had actually driven and funded much of the science that had saved my life. I am humbled and beyond grateful to Texas for making cancer research such a priority with the urgency that I feel every day. Because if I become resistant to this medicine, the outcomes right now would not be good. So I'm just so grateful to Texas and CPRIT for the research they're doing, which allows me to be operable and to raise my family and to be alive and live fully, with really a wonderful quality of life and the ability to be here. It makes all the difference. And the vision that y'all had in creating this and doing this is completely awesome to me.
Thank you for sharing your story. It's such an important part of the narrative of CPRIT. One of the things that you mentioned in your story is biomarkers and how important that was, and that's something that we're going to ask the legislature to consider this session. So thank you, and clearly I know you'll be part of that conversation in the Texas Capitol because it's really an important tool for cancer patients to have access to, and your story certainly demonstrates that. So thank you.
Yeah, without the biomarker testing, I would have been inoperable, and by now I would have died. There's no question.
Well, thank you for
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, well, you are the reason we do what we do. So thank you.
I'm grateful.
And Rob, we're going to invite you up next. So Rob Sarton is a caregiver, but really an advocate. I've had a chance to see him testify before the Texas Legislature. I've seen him in meetings really sharing his story, the story of his son. And he's really been there, like many of us, from the very beginning. And so he's been able to really kind of see the evolution of CPRIT and the impact that CPRIT has had, not just on the state, but really on his family. So Rob, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hi, I'm Rob Sarton. A lot of my story is really about why CPRIT is a good idea, less than direct stuff that affected us, because my son, when he was 4 years old, in 2004, was diagnosed with leukemia. To be honest, the experience we had is pretty much straight textbook. As I occasionally said when he was on treatment, I could have specified his drug dosage by reading the published treatment protocols from what we were doing, and he responded very well and had very limited side effects. But a lot of why I care about CPRIT is, first of all, I would like everybody's cancer experience to be that easy or easier, but also there's a huge hole in some of the treatment options for stuff like that and the long-term effects of all the medications you take. The treatment protocol he was on required 3 years and 2 months of chemotherapy because at the time there were no good measures for how to stop leukemia treatment earlier than that. Even if someone had lost signs of it in a biopsy, it could still be lurking in any number of places through the body. And in fact, all the studies showed that stopping treatment had really high relapse rates. So he was on chemo for 3 years and 2 months. We enrolled him in a study fairly early, right after his diagnosis, not because his case was weird, but because his case was normal. And they needed to do research to figure out which of the standard treatment options was the best one and how to reduce treatment wherever they can. Because one of the drugs he took, for example, results in peripheral neuromyopathy, which results in him not having the sort of hand control that most people have. And so he's much slower to handwrite and much messier to handwrite. You know, my own personal handwriting, since I'm a software engineer, is locked at about 5th grade. His locked more like kindergarten or 1st grade. He also has problems resulting directly from the chemo in math processing speed. He is, I mean, literally a genius and in math, incredibly strong, but he can't do the problems quickly. And that affects his results a lot of the time in time tests and the like. And then lastly, he's at long-term risk for cardiomyopathy, which is generally fatal heart condition that can result from some of the medications he took. CPRIT has funded efforts to reduce the treatment for pediatric cancer patients, reduce in particular the anthracycline loading that led to his risk for cardiomyopathy. In 2007, right after he went off treatment, we had a little bit of a scare because he had left ventricular hypertrophy, which is one of the first signs that they can see of cardiomyopathy. So I'm really invested personally in seeing treatment options improve there, and I love seeing what CPRIT does. Another area is, adolescents and young adults who had cancer, particularly pediatric cancers, notably his leukemia, have a higher risk of other things happening later in their life, other cancers. And when Spencer finished treatment, I think the study I read said he was about 13 times more likely to get cancer over the next 30 years of his life than his peer group. So these are long-term issues. These are things we need to keep working at. And that's one of the reasons CPRIT is such a good idea, is we've had now what amounts to, when the next round of funding or bills runs out, 20 years of doing CPRIT. And we're making progress all the time, and we need to keep on doing it.
Rob, thank you for that. And I can you just give us a quick update on your son today?
So my son is now 22 years old, lives in Denver, Colorado. I'm busily trying to recruit him to get back to Austin. So anybody knows any opportunities, let me know. He has a degree in economics from the University of Chicago, and he's doing well physically. He continues to have annual follow-ups for cancer and every 2 to 3 years for cardiology.
Thank you for sharing that. And that's the success of kind of where we are in the fight against cancer. So thank you for being part of this program. I'd like to now introduce Representative Jeannie Morrison. She's a state representative in District 30. She's currently serving her 12th term in the Texas Legislature. She has counties in South Texas, which include Aransas, Calhoun, DeWitt, Goliad, Refugio, and Victoria counties. And she serves on the very important House Appropriations Committee, which decides the funding for CPRIT. But more importantly, she was in the room in the very beginning in 2007 as one of the core group of legislators that really made CPRIT happen. And again, in 2019, was one of the passionate legislators that used her voice and her kind of political clout to get this done. So I'd love to have her talk about those early days and what it was like, and any reflection she has on the work that CPRIT's done since.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And the tribute to all of the cancer survivors and what they've been through. As we all know, we've all been affected with our families with cancer. And when this proposition came up to talk about with Senator Nelson and Jim Keffer, and of course, I'm in the Texas House. I was chairing higher education at the time. And we know what great institutions we have. We just needed help getting more people here to do the research so that we could work on this horrible disease. And so I was honored to be one of the 5 joint authors of the first legislation with Chairman Keffer. And it was one of those things that we all have been affected, but it was not an easy go in the first legislative session to try to get something put together and passed. Every time that you have a new idea, there's always skeptics of, well, will it really work? And so we worked really hard. We traveled around the state talking to people, and it was quite an effort, but we worked very hard and we did get it passed. And as you said, one of the most significant things was getting the rest of the state involved, because as we've all been touched, each and every one of us. I had just lost my dad just a few years before we started working on this, and to cancer also. And we had spent a lot of time at MD Anderson, and I know all the wonderful things that go on in our state. And so it was a work of love, basically, to work on this issue and get it passed. And then as we went through to get all of our constituents to vote to fund, because funding is one of the hardest things. And when you get any wonderful idea, to be able to get the funding is sometimes the hardest thing to happen. And so we worked diligently to get funding, and down through the years to get more funding where we are now, I think with just the miraculous things that have happened in research and the wonderful researchers and doctors that we have brought in because of CPRIT, the whole state is seeing the benefit of this and what is happening, but we never stop working on getting more funding, because the more funding we have, the more research we have, and the more help that we have. And it's something that, as we know, there's so many different types of cancers. There's so many ways to look at it. And as you're talking about the biomarkers, I mean, that is a wonderful thing to be working on also this next legislative session, so we can continue on to have this research to try to get rid of this horrible disease. I'm looking forward to working with all of you again in this endeavor. And I think with coming back into the House and the Senate, we've got great people that want to continue this, and we'll reach out to all of our constituents. We do have a lot of new members coming in, so it will be one of those things that we have to talk to all the new members that are coming into the House and the Senate and let them know what CPRIT is. And that will be part of our job, is to make sure that they understand what is happening and why it is so important. But as in appropriations, as you said, I serve on the appropriations committee at this time, and we are very positive for CPRIT. But as you know, there's going to be a lot of changes coming. We all get new committees in about February, so we don't know what committees we're going to be on. But regardless of what committees I'm on, I will definitely be one of the ones that will be working to make sure that we keep funding so that we have more successes in all of the research that's being done. You look at all of the families that are affected. You look at all these, a lot of children that are affected. And the more research there is, I also lost my mom to cancer several years after my dad. She had pancreatic cancer, and she was, we were getting treated at MD Anderson, and she was getting ready to have the Whipple surgery. But we found out right before the surgery that there was a little bit that was already in her bloodstream. My mom did a lot of cancer treatments and drugs that she was trying to help other people. And she was very successful in those treatments. And she knew it was not going to help her probably in the end, but she did a lot of special cancer treatments that now today are things that are being used through those patients that did those trials. And so that's something that is very important too, just to continue that the trials and seeing what we can do to improve outcomes. So I just want to thank everyone that's been involved with CPRIT. I really look forward to pushing again to make sure that we keep the funding and more funding, because it's very important for the state of Texas. Texas is a leader in cancer research. Texas is a leader in all the wonderful hospitals that we have that are doing the research. And so it is my passion to continue that work and help the cancer survivors and those that are going to be diagnosed in the future. And I thank you so much for doing this conference, because it's important for all of us to work together and get ready. The legislative session starts January the 10th. That's not very far off. So we have a lot of work to get ready for, and get ready for the job of putting it together and keeping our state in the forefront of this cancer research. Thank you so much for doing this today.
Thank you for joining us. And a couple of important points I want to just reinforce. One is, this was personal for you as well, right? And that's a strong motivation. But 40, particularly, there might be 40 new members coming into the House, and many folks in the House and the Senate weren't there in 2007.
That's right.
So it's up to us as advocates. It's up to us as people that care about the fight against cancer to be in that building and educate them on why CPRIT still is important, and really talk about the success that this program has had. So I want to introduce Kristen Doyle next. She has been with CPRIT and one of the first staff hired. And she joined the agency in 2009 and is responsible for overseeing the legal and policy issues that arise as part of the CPRIT operations, including grant award contracts, negotiations, intellectual property and revenue sharing agreements, and so on. That's a really interesting role that you have, Kristen, but I know you do so much more than that. But more importantly, I love the fact that you understood why CPRIT was so important before CPRIT became a reality. And so to see you on the staff there now doing what you've done and really kind of be a big part of the success over the last 15 years is exciting. So I'd love to hear about that role that you play, and more importantly, what CPRIT's been doing for the last 15 years.
So my path to CPRIT began in 2005. That year, I was one of 87,000 Texans that was diagnosed with cancer. My doctor told me that I had acute leukemia on January 19th. And just like that, my life changed for me and my family. After 9 months of chemotherapy and a life-saving bone marrow transplant from my sister, I was able to return to my life. And, as we are hearing today, there are so many personal stories of cancer. Unfortunately, almost every Texas family is affected in some way by a cancer diagnosis. So for me and my family, it left us with a profound sense of gratitude and respect for the work of the people that came before us. And around that very same time, as I was returning to my life, there was a small group of brilliant Texans, including John Mendelsohn, then president of MD Anderson, John Sharp, Kathy Bonner. They all met at a summer retreat in 2006. And through their personal experiences with cancer, they launched this audacious plan that would become CPRIT. So together with the advocates that we've heard and the forward-thinking legislators like Representative Morrison and our state leadership, the idea of CPRIT came to fruition. But it wasn't until we had that statewide vote of all Texans in November of 2007 that CPRIT became a reality. And I stood in line with my husband and my son to vote for CPRIT in 2017. And now 15 years later, after that historic vote, it is easy to see the difference that Texas's commitment has made. CPRIT has directly invested more than $3 billion since 2009 in preventing cancer and researching cures and treatments. CPRIT screening projects have detected more than 32,000 cancer and cancer precursors and educated hundreds of thousands of Texans on preventing cancer and detecting it early. Research at all levels in Texas have produced groundbreaking discoveries, and those are fueling the pipeline for innovative treatments and cures for cancer now and for decades to come. But I'm jumping ahead. CPRIT officially opened its doors on September 1st, 2009. And I was incredibly lucky to be hired as CPRIT's general counsel. And through that, I've had a front row seat on this awesome initiative. When we started, we had 20 employees, 11 oversight committee members, 0 grants, and none of our money spent. Texas trusted us with an enormous responsibility. We have had the hopes and the dreams for what we expected CPRIT to be, but laying that foundation for identifying and funding the most innovative cancer research projects and cancer prevention strategies, that required bold leaders. And CPRIT's incredibly successful academic research program is a testament to CPRIT's first chief scientific officer, Dr. Al Gilman. Dr. Margaret Kripke and Dr. Jim Wilson built on his legacy, and now Dr. Michelle LeBeau is leading an unmatched scientific program that funds more than 1,000 research projects and is responsible for recruiting nearly 300 preeminent cancer researchers to Texas. In addition to those fearless leaders, CPRIT has also needed really bold ideas. And our oversight committee has charted a course early on that is evident today through, its early and sustained commitment to pediatric and adolescent cancer. CPRIT's dedicated more than 11% of our research portfolio to childhood cancer. Proportionally, that's 3 times more than the national commitment. And, because this is Texas, the Oversight Committee has built a foundation that focuses on cancers that disproportionately affect Texans, including liver cancer. Also, from the very beginning, CPRIT has recognized the important part of our mission is moving discoveries out of the research laboratories and on the pathway to patients. We do this through clinical research. We have more than 40,000 patients and 228 clinical trials or studies, and by supporting more than 50 early stage companies that are moving those incredible discoveries through the regulatory steps to get treatments to patients. So as exciting as these groundbreaking initiatives are, actually funding $3 billion is a lot of work. That starts with hundreds of peer reviewers that have devoted thousands of hours to reviewing every single application and identifying the very best and most promising. And every dollar that is spent, so that's $3 billion that have been spent on cancer research and prevention projects, that's reviewed and approved by our grant accountants. Our compliance team ensures the integrity of all of the systems to protect the enormous faith that Texans have put into us. And CPRIT would not be the powerhouse that it is today without the steady hand and the guidance of our Chief Executive Officer, Wayne Roberts, and our Chief Operating Officer, Heidi McConnell. I know that I speak for all CPRIT employees in saying how proud I am to be here and to be part of this amazing initiative. It truly is the work of a lifetime. We are honored with your trust, but despite the advances that Texas has made in the war on cancer, this horrible disease remains a leading cause of death for Texans under the age of 85. So there's a lot more work to do. We are excited and ready to do it and looking forward to the successes that the next decades will bring. Thank you. And I think now I have the honor to introduce one of the shining stars of the CPRIT Scholar Program, Dr. Jim Allison. So CPRIT's extraordinarily successful initiative is our recruitment program, and that draws world-class scientists at all career stage to Texas universities and cancer research institutes. So to date, we have brought more than 288 CPRIT scholars to Texas. In 2014, together with MD Anderson, CPRIT helped recruit Dr. Allison back to Texas. He is known as the father of immunotherapy. His work developing the first immune checkpoint inhibitor to treat cancer was recognized in 2018 with the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. He's currently the director of the Allison Institute at MD Anderson, which is leading the world in immunotherapy research. Dr. Allison?
Thank you very much, Kristen. Yes, I owe a lot to CPRIT. She mentioned I grew up in Texas, and I had the misfortune, like many people, to have cancer in my family. My mother died when I was very young of leukemia. I saw what radiation can do, and unfortunately it didn't work for her. Two of her brothers also died of cancer, and one of melanoma, and there were no treatments at the time, so he just forewent it and waited for death. Another of her brothers died of lung cancer and got chemotherapy, and I saw the ravages that can do. Later on, my brother got prostate cancer. Both my brothers actually got prostate cancer, and one of them passed away from it. And so I've had a grudge against cancer since my early days. I went to the University of Texas and hoping to do something about it. I initially majored in biochemistry, but while I was there, I heard a course in immunology and learned about this new cell that had been discovered in the immune system called a T cell. And these are fascinating things, and all they knew about them was they go through the body, they percolate through the tissues, go through your blood, your lymph glands, search out things that are wrong, a virus infection, or I wondered, cancer perhaps, and eliminate it and can kill cells. And so I decided at that time, that's what I wanted to do with my career. So I spent 3.5 years in La Jolla at the Scripps Clinic, learning basics of immunology in a lab, although I was still basically doing basic immunology. So I was lucky enough to be recruited back to MD Anderson in the science park near Smithville, where I devoted to solving one of the key problems in the immune system at the time, which was how does a T cell recognize something that was foreign? That had been the holy grail for about 2 decades in the field. And there, with my colleagues, I succeeded in working the structure of that molecule out. But I knew I needed to go further and learn molecular biology and other things. So I had a job offer from the University of California at Berkeley and offered to build an immunology program there. So I went there where I continued my studies and was there for about 2 decades, working out some more molecules, and finally had a pretty good notion of how T cells worked, how they were controlled, and how we could change what they did a bit. And so with that, armed with that knowledge, then I turned back to cancer and developed a way to unleash T cells to attack cancer, with the hope that this would be a way of just having your own body eliminate the cancer without affecting normal cells. And in a lot of animal models, we could make this work. Unfortunately, it wasn't a very good popular topic at the time, and it took me a long time to convince somebody to actually try it in humans. But finally, went into clinical trials at a lot of places, including the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York. I was a basic scientist, but this therapy was so new that I was afraid if I wasn't around when where the trials were done, and explained to the oncologist that this isn't a therapy that kills cancer cells, it unleashes your own cells to kill the cancer cells. And so you have to look at it differently. And so I was there for about 9 years through the first approval of the first drug, ipilimumab, which was approved for treatment of metastatic melanoma in 2011. Subsequently, there were other contributions made by other people, but basically now the combination of immunotherapies, melanoma, which in 2011, the median life expectancy after diagnosis was 7 months. And there were fewer than 3% of people alive at 5 years. Now, one of the trials, most recent trials that was started, which is about 8 years old, 60% of the patients in a very large randomized trial are still alive. At that point, I think we can call those patients cured. And so I began to look to a place where I could apply my skills as an investigator in a more efficient way towards moving this on, and began talking with colleagues at MD Anderson, and found a very fertile place for what I wanted to do and a way of continuing it. Problem was that I really couldn't move because my funding at the time was provided by the Howard Hughes Medical Institute and the Ludwig Institute, a New York charity, both of which would not allow me to take the money with me when I left. And so luckily CPRIT was there. I'd been a reviewer for CPRIT, but I talked to the leadership there, to Al and others. They said, well, why don't you apply to Texas? So I went to Anderson and they said, yes, come on down. And so the bottom line is that I got a CPRIT support for moving my laboratory, not just myself, but 12 other people down, where we're now trying to extend those studies, working with my colleague, Pam Sharma, who's an oncologist as well as a scientist, to develop new combinations of therapies and bring them to other cancers. Under her leadership, we've already brought it to bladder cancer, for example. This kind of therapy, since it treats the immune system and not the cancer cells, can work against many kinds of cancers. Not all, unfortunately. It's not very effective against glioblastoma or pancreatic cancer, which you heard about earlier. But we're working very hard now with the specialties in those different fields of cancer treatment at MD Anderson to extend this type of therapy to as many patients as we can, to cure as many patients as we can. Not just prolong life for a few months, but cure them. And that's the nice thing about the immune system. Once you've got these T cells, they're with you for the rest of your life. And if the tumor can recurs, they have the capacity to come back and eliminate it again. And so we're trying to get this to work and understand why it doesn't work in some patients, why it doesn't work at all in some kinds of cancers, I just told you. Again, with the goal of treating as many cancer patients as we can. Many of the research of our colleagues there has been supported by CPRIT grants as well. But all I have to say is thank you, CPRIT, because without that money, I would not be in Texas now. I would not have had the good fortune to move to MD Anderson, come home to Texas, and try to attack cancer in this really, I think, very successful way and promising. Yeah. So thank you for that opportunity.
Dr. Allison, we're honored to have you back in the state where you belong, and more importantly, for the work you've done. And I want to thank you. In 2018, when you were awarded the Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine, you came into the Texas Capitol that session in 2019 to be honored for that recognition. And your ability to be in meetings with members to explain what CPRIT does and what your research does really provided some clarity and helped us move that piece of legislation in 2019. So thank you for that. And it had a big impact.
I'm glad, and I should also tell you that when I met the governor that day, I probably passed the word on to him that I thought that he ought to make sure that CPRIT was renewed.
Well, thank you. We certainly appreciate that. And do that any chance you can.
I am. You bet.
Clearly the mission of CPRIT when the original legislation had a lot of different components to it. One was economic development, and CPRIT has certainly met the goals within economic development. And we're lucky to have Ray Perryman, who is the president and CEO of the Perryman Group. He does economic research and analysis in an analysis firm based in Waco, Texas. He holds a BS in mathematics from Baylor University and a PhD in economics from Rice University. I love his bio. Clearly, he's a humorist too. He goes on to mention that he's been dubbed, and I think this is in all seriousness, a genius by the Wall Street Journal, a world-class scholar by Business Week, and the unofficial state economist by the New York Times, which is very true. I think the piece of his bio that stands out the most is that I have 3 daughters, so I can understand this. He's an honorary Kilgore Rangette, although his high kick leaves a lot desired, so he hasn't quite the travel team yet. Mr. Perryman, I'll hand this to you.
Thanks a lot, James. I appreciate it. First of all, it's Kilgore Rangerette and it's Refugio. we can tell you're not from Texas. But in any case, it is a privilege to be here. And I saw the Rangerettes on the Macy's parade a couple of weeks ago, and my high kick still hasn't made the cut for the traveling squad, but I'm working on it. It's a privilege to be here and talk about this today. The real story of cancer is what Lana said, what Rob said, what Kristen said, what Jim said, the lives that it affects. The role I play is to basically add all of that together, but never lose sight of the fact that what I do is basically quantify the reality of this terrible disease. I was privileged shortly after the big meeting that Kristen referred to, that Kathy and John and others were at. Jim Keffer, whom I'd worked with a lot when he chaired economic development, and Governor Perry at the time came to me and began to talk about this thing. And we actually put together some numbers of what the cost of cancer was to Texas and what the impact of an idea like this might be long before the bill actually made its way through the legislature and was voted on. And obviously the leadership of Representative Morrison and others made that possible. But again, it's all about the people. You've heard some stories today. We've every year since CPRIT was initiated, we have done an economic assessment, an economic update of CPRIT, and I will say it has far exceeded even what we thought were some pretty lofty expectations of what something like this might do. And I want to try to focus on a few of those things. First of all, though, just the cost of cancer. And the way we measure it, when we measure something, we try to measure as much of it as we possibly can. We're not talking about just medical costs. We're talking about people who are off from work because of cancer treatment. We're talking about people who die because of cancer, and hence you lose years and years and years of productivity in their lives. When you quantify all of that, of just the people who are impacted in a given year, the new report will be releasing soon is going to show that number in the state of Texas, that cost is now above $50 billion a year. It's a staggering amount of economic loss we suffer because of this disease. The impact of CPRIT, I mean, again, it's off the charts. I mean, it far exceeds anything we thought. Cumulatively, since it started, we estimate the total benefit. And again, that includes all the spinoff activities, the companies that have been formed, the jobs that have been created, the people who have been impacted. Everything together is about $293 billion. So averaging roughly $20 billion a year in impact over this 15 years. And the nice thing about that is, and particularly with renewal, it's cumulative, because if you have a positive impact one year and it's something that's recurring, such as improvement in outcomes for cancer patients, it comes year after year after year, you get that benefit. So these things compound over time, and it becomes much more significant. In terms of a payoff to the state of Texas, which I know is something that's always an issue in Austin, we get roughly $76 in gross product for every dollar that's been spent by the state on CPRIT. Probably a number that's even more important. We're estimating, when you use all of the dynamics and all the effects, that when the dollars the state has invested in CPRIT, every dollar the legislature puts in brings back about $4.19 to the state treasury, and brings about $1.79 to local governments because of the impacts it has on a variety of different issues in local governments as well. And it's just beginning. It's just beginning. I mean, we're all affected by cancer in some significant ways. At the time I was working on the initial studies back in 2006, 2007, my mother-in-law was in advanced stages and ultimately died of cancer. 5 years later, my father had a similar fate. But I can tell you, my daughter this week had her second surgery for a cancer that had, the prognosis of it has been dramatically improved because of the biomarker type of research that has been funded and supported by CPRIT. That's a direct impact in my life. I know many of you have similar stories like that. What could have been devastating a very short period of time ago is now a fairly routine thing that's probably going to be dealt with without a great deal of difficulty. But from an economic perspective, there's one other thing I want to talk about, and I think this is important. Obviously, biosciences have been in a revolution of late. It was already ongoing. COVID put it on steroids. I mean, we are focused on biomedicine right now. There's big initiatives. Wayne and I are on a group, and Chris and others working on trying to get a big initiative for Texas right now. But in the course of doing that, I looked at some pretty interesting numbers. With the growth we've been seeing in biosciences, we've seen in terms of employment, we've seen a 13% growth in employment in the United States in biosciences in the last, since 2010, 13%, which is pretty healthy for that type of industry. We have seen a 32% rate of growth in Texas in bioscience employment. And during that same time period, the places you hear about, Massachusetts has actually had a decline in its employment. Pennsylvania has had a decline in its employment. Some of the other major states have had 10, 11% growth, 5% growth, but Texas has had 32% growth. Now, you can't say CPRIT's 100% responsible for that. There's a lot of great programs, a lot of great things going on in the state right now, but there's also a lot of great things going on in other states right now. The differentiating feature, the thing that has set Texas apart from everyone else, is we have made this commitment, this great commitment to the bioscience field through this unprecedented investment in cancer research. And it's really reshaped the entire view of Texas as a biopharma center. I've been doing this a long time. When I was in the 80s, when I started doing it back in the late 70s, early 80s, Texas had a little bit of a complex because we seemed to have everything except biosciences. And we didn't really have a good, strong place there. We built electronics, we built everything. We're always lagging in biosciences. We are catching up in spades right now. And we are by far the leading area of growth in the biosciences. And I don't think any of that would have been possible without CPRIT. If I could just kind of wrap this up, and this piece of it, since I've talked a lot about numbers, or some of it's not numbers, but I think it kind of encapsulates what we do here. My wife and I are fairly avid art aficionados and art collectors. There was a painting by one of the surrealist artists, Rene Magritte. If you're not an art fan, he was a Belgian artist, probably the most famous painting is one that the guy with the bowler hat on and the green apple in his mouth that was used in the Thomas Crown Affair. That's probably his most famous painting. He did a number of other famous paintings, but he did one in 1936, which is a self-portrait of him at his easel painting. By his side, it's a still life he's painting. By his side is an egg. That's his model. On the canvas is a bird. He is looking at what is, and he's seeing what can be. And that's what the leadership of the state of Texas did, Representative Morrison and others who played a vital role. That's what the leadership of Texas did 15 years ago. They looked at what could be, and they created what is. And we're now seeing the benefits of that, and those will only multiply over time. And I think that's a very, very important encapsulation of what CPRIT is, what it has been, and more importantly, what it will continue to be in a growing way in the future. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today.
Right. I really appreciate not only your knowledge, but your passion around CPRIT and the work they've done to create economic development here in the state, but also sharing your personal story too. I know this is, you're a convincing voice in the state legislature. So
Sometimes.
on this issue, certainly all the time. So we'll continue to amplify the work that you do to make sure that members know that we've achieved some of the economic development goals they set out. So now we want to start thinking about the next 15 years. And CPRIT is lucky to have world-class staff, but they also have a world-class set of oversight committee members, as well as volunteers that staff various committees that are really kind of thinking about the long-term opportunities of CPRIT. And today we're joined by Dr. Mahendra Patel, who is a pediatric hematologist oncologist in San Antonio. He has an extensive record of leadership in the San Antonio medical community, including his time as the medical board chair at Methodist Healthcare System and chief of staff at the Methodist Children's Hospital. He was appointed to the Oversight Committee Board in 2017 and now serves as the presiding officer, and really has the sight line to all things that CPRIT is doing and helps set that vision, long-term vision for the continued success of this agency. So Dr. Patel, welcome.
Thank you very much, James. And my thanks to the panelists on this panel also. As mentioned, I'm a pediatric hematologist oncologist practicing in San Antonio, Texas. And more often than not, when one says pediatric oncology, it sort of evokes a visceral response of sympathy from most people of how hard it must be. Not really, because I have a very simple philosophic approach. And that is to tell every patient of mine every day, I love you. Give them a big hug, and like every parent, demand good grades, which often elicits rolls and groans. But hey, that's the way it is. How many of us can be blessed with 20 or 30 I love yous a day? I am. So in my field, at times it's difficult, but it's extraordinarily joyful also. Well, why pediatric oncology? While I was growing up in Africa, one of the survivors was born in South Africa, I presume, and I was born in Central Africa, Zambia. My sister at that time, who was about 10 or 12 years of age, she was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and it was not curable. However, there was a missionary doctor from Mississippi, Dr. Foster, who took care of her. He had put in a shunt to relieve the pressure in her brain and visited every day at home to give us hope. And that very kind doctor was my impetus to go into pediatric oncology. Now, serving on the CPRIT Oversight Board is an honor for all of us members. For me personally, it distills down, and a paraphrase is that serving Texas to honor God. That drives us on the Oversight Committee to serve. Our role as oversight members is to participate in all aspects of grant approval processes, following very thorough evaluation, and only then do we make informed decisions. CPRIT has managed to surpass initial expectations of being innovative, breaking conventional norms, thus Texas being the only state in the union to have an agency such as this, and the second largest funder of cancer research in the United States after the National Cancer Institute. Now, I had labeled my talk Dreams and Hopes, and this is after Kristen Doyle had actually suggested it to me. This was the dream and hope of the lead author of HJR 90, Representative Jim Kepper, Senator Nelson, Representative Jeannie Morrison, from whom we've heard already today. The foundations of CPRIT version 1 have been laid firmly into the fabric of Texas because of forward-leading thinkers like Representative Morrison, Keffler, and Nelson. Extraordinary group, and many, many more in the Texas Legislature, With the approval, as you've heard from Ms. Doyle, of the second $3 billion grant and bonds, so to speak of, we have embarked on CPRIT version 2. What does this mean for the near future as seen from the perspective of academic research, prevention, and product development? Usually, as you know, most organizations develop silos by now and are entrenched and often holds back the primary mission of that particular agency. But this is not the case at CPRIT, due to the leadership of CPRIT's CEO, Wayne Roberts, and he was recognized as such recently. There is and will be in the future continued cross-collaboration to seamlessly provide cutting-edge continuum of cancer care to the entire citizenry of the 54 counties that make up the state of Texas. In other words, CPRIT will be determining and setting the agenda for cancer research, prevention services, and biotech space development. We will lead in defining the social determinants of cancer care affecting Texas cancer patients, their families and counties, and Texas as a whole, as mentioned by Dr. Perryman. Your investments will generate new paradigms in cancer research and access to care in geographically diverse regions of Texas, and to underserved populations in both the urban, suburban, and rural areas of Texas, as so determined by the legislature. With the increasing number of cancer survivors, as we've heard from one of our presenters, we will develop and lead the nation in minimizing toxicity and long-term side effects of cancer therapy. Curing cancer is our goal, but not at the cost of adversely affecting one's quality of life. Above all, it requires human capital. CPRIT's investments and programs will develop and continue to enhance cooperation between major institutions, recruiting, training, retaining cancer researchers in our state. We will fund programs to facilitate continued training of rural cancer treatment teams with the major cancer centers that we have. The upcoming Texas Regional Excellence Centers grants, affectionately known as TREC, will help facilitate this important goal. Thus, we shall ensure that we will attain our shared hope of cancer healthcare equity, and which is very important to mention again, is healthcare equity for the people of Texas. Through participation in the Texas Connect, for example, for cancer prevention study, we will lead in generating new insights on cancer biology, effects of social, behavioral, environmental factors, including that of characterizing cancer presentation in racial and ethnic groups. We will be generating big data, as you can imagine. It'll be an extraordinary amount of data being collected, which will lead to precision prevention, risk assessment, and early detection from innovative uses of deep machine learning using both static and dynamic algorithms or artificial intelligence. At the current time, knowledge gained from CPRIT-funded statewide colorectal screening initiatives have been extraordinarily successful, and we see CPRIT's envisions that we will have similar initiatives in breast, cervical, and lung cancers. And this is coming from the prevention side of CPRIT. Cancer care requires CPRIT not only to be innovative, but to be able to develop and sustain the biopharma space. This is where the product division comes into play. The product development program will design and implement bridging RFAs, amongst others, to provide additional resources for nascent companies, identify and foster companies of strategic importance to Texas. We understandably have academic corridors in Texas. We in CPRIT will design and develop product development corridors which should take into account the entirety of Texas in an equitable manner, investing in welcoming communities where feasible, forging alliances between academic, non-academic centers and industry. These grants can be modeled from the TREC mechanism we already have in place. The above is CPRIT version 2, but knowing CPRIT, a vision will be set going forwards to version 3. And we've heard about allusions about that and the support that we have from legislatures. That vision is of the CPRIT model being the first in the nation to be adopted and implemented in all 49 states. Texas, with its successful model, can and will lead national cancer research consortiums and networks. For this vision, CPRIT will also have to develop alternative funding sources, which I'm sure the legislature will be happy to hear, to continue being a leader in this space, and not just in the United States, but personally, I feel should be internationally recognized as such. Lastly, the above thoughts, everything that I've talked about, is a distillation in dreams of hopes of many brought to life by the steadfast leadership of Wayne Roberts, Ramona Magid, Chief Prevention Officer, Dr. LeBeau, Chief Scientific Officer, Dr. Ken Smith, Chief Product Development Officer, and the extraordinary and dedicated team members. The wise counsel, and by that I mean Ms. Kristen Doyle. She's a counsel in the true form, and not just as a legal advisor. She's invaluable. To my fellow colleagues in the Oversight Committee, thank you for your commitment to Texas. The state of Texas and its people owe a debt of gratitude for realizing their dreams and hopes. And these dreams have come to reality, as you've heard, but we need to develop the next generation for the next 50 years and not the 15 years that had been asked of me. I look at it from a different perspective. But thank you very much for allowing me to participate in this wonderful panel, and for all the other panelists. I really, truly thank you and thank the American Cancer Society. Jolly decent show, I'd say.
I love that. Dr. Patel, thank you for your leadership and your tireless commitment to CPRIT. I know it's significant work, but your vision with the Oversight Committee, I think, certainly will get us to CPRIT 3.0. And we're going to move into the Q&A section, and we get a few questions for some of the speakers. And the first one is for Representative Morrison. And I think there's a bit of a surprise that CPRIT has to be funded every 2 years. And the question is, why is that? And then what can those that are listening in do to help influence to make sure it's funded every 2 years?
In the state of Texas, we do a budget biannually because we do it for 2 years. The legislature only meets every other year in the odd numbered years. And so our budget is just for 2 years. And so that's the way we work it. We really can't give to the legislatures after us, tell them that you have to fund things. And so it's a 2-year funding, and that's why we always have to come back and refund. It's the way that we work, and we have a balanced budget by the Constitution of the state of Texas, so we cannot spend more than we have. And so that's why we have to do it every 2 years.
And in addition to that, the question regarding how does somebody, obviously CPRIT covers a lot of ground. How would one talk to their state representative about the important role CPRIT plays?
Oh, very easily. You can email, you can send letters, you can call. Just look for your state rep. It's very easy to go online and find who your state rep is, because you go in and just put in your address and it will tell you. Of course, we have a lot of changes this legislative session because we just did redistricting, because every 10 years after we do the census, we have to expand our who we represent because the state is growing so much. But it's very easy to find who your state representative is. There's also usually there are this particular days during the legislative session. Then I don't know if there's one plan that maybe down the road there might be a day that those that are working on the next step for CPRIT might be coming to the Capitol. And that's also a good day to have kind of a day that you go up and go visit your legislators and different legislators, especially that are working on appropriations or the actual legislation itself.
Right. And we'll put something into the chat too, where folks can sign up
Sure.
on social media. We obviously track this. So one of the things we probably didn't spend enough time on, because we probably need a full day to have this conversation, is the prevention work that's happening. Dr. Patel or Kristen, would you want to talk a little bit about the commitment CPRIT's made to cancer prevention, early detection?
Sure, I'll take the first stab, and Dr. Patel, you fill in anything that I have missed. CPRIT can commit up to 10% of its funding to cancer prevention, and we have done that. We have maxed out our commitment to prevention every year. A lot of that is funded through screening, but it's also important on education, because the easiest way, the most economical way to treat cancer is to never have it. So if we can help people stop smoking, if we can encourage healthy habits that will stop or push off the development of cancer, then that is an investment that Texas needs to make. The other great thing about our prevention program is that we are able to touch all 254 counties of Texas. We have projects that address rural, underserved, underrepresented populations, and make culturally appropriate prevention strategies for them. Like I said, through this work, just through the screenings, we have helped detect more than 32,000 cancer precursors and cancers, and help to navigate those Texans into appropriate treatment. Dr. Patel?
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. It's to date, Kristen is right. That's what we've achieved, and it's 10% of the overall budget, and that's been determined by the state legislature. But I think the impact on the prevention side of it is significant. It's extraordinary. And what they've achieved in such a short time is amazing. And as Ed mentioned, the Texas Connect will have thousands of Texans enrolled in it, and we'll be doing a prospective study longitudinally in all the onomics side of cancer prevention and detection and therapy. Is that we will need big data analysis to come into play, and that's where that artificial intelligence or computational biology will come into play and have significant impact, looking at culturally diverse, ethnically diverse, geographically diverse societies within Texas in itself. I think to date, and Dr. Perryman can talk about this and address this a little bit, is that with the prevention side of it, what has been the economic benefit that we've achieved from that particular perspective?
Yeah, I can add just very briefly. Again, from numbers we're going to be releasing very, very soon here, the every dollar we spend on prevention on average brings us benefit to the state of about $27, $28. I mean, there's a big, huge payoff there for that. And I think another aspect of it, something Wayne asked me to look at this time, and the data is very limited at this point, but we've got the big data as big as we could get it to figure out a little bit here. This piece of what CPRIT does is going to take on heightened importance because of the screenings and treatment things that were deferred during COVID. People just weren't able to get the treatments and screenings they needed. That will make it important to redouble these efforts going forward to try to offset some of it, because we're going to be seeing the impacts of that for decades to come. The fact that we simply went through a period of time where it couldn't be done as aggressively as we would like for it to be. And so it's a very, very, very important aspect of what CPRIT does.
So purely from an economic standpoint of view, if you look at it, the return of investment is significantly better than the current market, I suppose.
No doubt about that. 27,000% beats 8% all over the place.
I love that conversation, and that's clearly a conversation we're having in the Capitol often. Dr. Allison, a lot of interest in immunotherapy and questions about kind of what are we seeing in the future in terms of the promise of immunotherapy or potential. Dr. Allison, looks like you're
have a little trouble with unmuting. I think what we're going to see is that this sort of treatment is effective right now across the board. It's somewhere between 20 and 60%. I mean, I don't mean effective. I mean people that are considered cured. They have 5-year plus, 10-year plus, in some cases longer, depending on how long the therapies have been around. But expectancies, and that's because that's as long as they've been followed. But that's not good enough. And so what we're looking forward to are more of the sort of targets that I discovered when I was at Berkeley and then worked on it. So I'm going to continue to work on them, that are molecules that we can push on to make T cells more or less active, or other kinds of cells that are important. A kind of cell called a myeloid cell is one that hadn't been recognized as being important until very recently. And we're studying ways, they get in the way sometimes. We're figuring out ways of inactivating those, but also just common sense ways of combining chemotherapy and radiation in ways that are not trying to kill every tumor cell and going overboard, basically nuking the patient, with large doses of radiation or large doses of chemo or other treatments, but just enough to kill enough cells. It's tumor cell death that primes the immune system. And as we learn more about that, we can take cancers where we know that there's certain treatments that are effective, but maybe too toxic to use widely, or might have promise when combined with immunotherapies towards expanding both the efficacy and getting rid of the toxicities. And so those are the main things, is new combinations with newly developed targets, but also just going back and immunotherapy is not going to ever replace radiation or chemotherapy or surgery, for that matter. One of the things we found in the last couple of years is that by surgically removing just one metastasis, for example, from a patient, followed by immunotherapy, results in a much better outcome for the patient than just removing the tumor by itself. These things are all in their early times, but I think things are just going to keep getting better and better. And the good point that we're at now is prior to the FDA approval of ipilimumab in 2011, the question was, can we cure cancer with immunotherapy? And the answer to that is a resounding yes, we can. Now the question is, how can we make it work better? And the good news is that we've got the building blocks. We know the basic principles now. It's going to take more people trained, hopefully, through places like MD Anderson that train doctors and students, and then training of surgeons and physicians how to do this. Bring the clinical ideas back into the laboratory bench and bring some reality to the work we do on the bench and combine things in a way that get us there. And I'm very optimistic. One of the things I'd like to say to people is that cancer is not necessarily a fatal disease across the board, at least anymore. Even the cancers, largely, not all of them. As I said, there's some that don't respond well yet, but we know the basics, and it's a matter of just working harder, learning more, and applying it, all of which is helped in great fashion by CPRIT. I have a fellow that I recruited to my group from the University of California, San Francisco recently, who's a pioneer in mathematical analyses of small bits of tissue to know gene expression and protein expression, so we can tell the effect of an immune cell on the cell next to it, or one kind of immune cell on the next one, so we can begin to push on those switches and make them do what we want to do, and in order to eliminate cancer. And so I'm really optimistic about where we're going.
That's great. I think we're at the end of our questions and end of our forum, but I just want to thank all of our speakers. It's a really important story narrative to continue to make sure we're promoting. The work of CPRIT is really sophisticated, but so critical to the overall work that we are doing as a state. I can't thank staff enough. Our CPRIT staff have not only built this program, but really kind of built the program or created the vision for the next 15 years. And that takes work. And they are dedicated, not just because it's their job, because it's their passion, and that makes all the difference. So I want to just, remind folks, when we started this conversation, we talked about, one of the things we talked about is shaping or influencing public policy to reduce the burden of cancer. Everything we've talked about today has been driven by public policy. You can join our efforts. Again, what happens in the Texas Capitol does influence our overall efforts to reduce the burden of cancer here in Texas. We'll drop into the chat a way that you can stay connected to our work. You can be an advocate for all of the issues that we've talked about. We are little more than a month away from the 2023 legislative session. Our priorities include funding for CPRIT, funding for breast and cervical cancer programs, tobacco control programs, as well as trying to pass meaningful biomarker assurances for cancer patients. So those issues move forward. And if some of you want to join that campaign, we'd love to have you. We will continue to talk about another really important issue. If you want to join us tomorrow morning, we have a very informal conversation with Congressman Arrington, who is the lead House sponsor on the Medicare Multi-Cancer Early Detection Screening Coverage Act. An important piece of legislation making its way through the federal level, and he's been a staunch champion for that. In the chat, there'll be a link to register for that event. That'll be 9:30 tomorrow morning for about 30 minutes. He's very enthusiastic about trying to move this session before year end. But more importantly, he has a really compelling reason why this is important to him and important to his constituents. So if you want to hear more about some of our federal work, tune in for about 30 minutes tomorrow. We'd love to see you, have you join us. So again, thank you, everybody. Really appreciated this conversation, and really impressed and continue to be impressed by the great work that CPRIT's doing. Thank you very much.